Of the top 20 grossing video games last year, 15 were sequels, 7 were first-person shooters, and 19 were made by AAA studios. Games like Call of Duty, Madden, 2K, Pokemon, Mario Kart, and Mortal Kombat, which have been relatively the same game for their entire time as a series, all made the top 20. These titles by AAA studios essentially get republished each year with the addition of a new number in the title or a colon followed by some dumb catchphrase, but are usually just offering the same game. Whether it's the same mechanics, or in the case of Far Cry Primal, literally the same map, these games get recycled and put back on shelves so that big companies that make them don't have to worry about making new, interesting, and engaging titles. These companies don't have to be worried about sales because they know that if they slap a new number on a pre-existing mainstream game series, the fans of that series will buy the new game no matter what. On the other end of the spectrum, independent developers fully rely on the quality and uniqueness of their games to sell. That's where I think you find some of the most interesting and creative games. Some indie titles that were released last year include A Short Hike, Outer Wilds, Katana Zero, Sayonara Wild Hearts, Ape Out, Baba Is You, and of course, who could forget Untitled Goose Game? Each of these games are so unique in the way they look and in the way they play, and that makes them stand out so much more from the typical cut and paste routine that these big AAA studios fall into. So then why are indie games so much more interesting than those produced by big AAA studios who have access to an almost unlimited budget? Well, most of the time indie games are passion projects made by a small group of people who are willing to put in the time. Celeste, Hollow Knight, and Minecraft are great indie games that just perfectly showcase the love and care that makes most indie games so special. First off, you have Celeste. Every single level in this game is fun. There's never a down moment because at every corner there's a new mechanic or an interesting puzzle that you have to solve. Everything in this game flows so smoothly. You've got these little stop signs that go like... and the space blob that's like... and the bubble which goes... and the feather that's all like... The gameplay is amazing on its own, but the story is what takes it to another level. The whole thing is about overcoming your own anxiety and depression, which is exactly what the gameplay does. It puts you in these rooms where one wrong mistake causes you to start over. Each room is like a little slice of anxiety, and every time you get past a room, you get this feeling of satisfaction knowing you just overcame that challenge. Very few games can make me feel good about beating them, but Celeste is one of those games. It perfectly intertwines good gameplay and impactful storytelling into one game so that when you're done playing it, it fills you with this sense of accomplishment that not a lot of other games come close to. Then you have Hollow Knight. This is one of the most polished games I've ever played, and is possibly my favorite game of all time. From the platforming, to the combat, to the progression system of always finding new upgrades and skills, to the absolutely amazing boss fights that all feel individually their own, this game is a masterpiece. The thing that makes it even better is the developers. They continually prove how invested they are in the game and in the community that supports them. Hollow Knight was funded by a Kickstarter which raised roughly $60,000, a very small budget compared to most games, and a few years later the game was released on Steam for only $15. A game that takes around 40 hours to beat, sold at an affordable price, is unheard of. But the developers didn't stop there. After the initial release, they added another 30-ish hours of content, offered in 3 free updates, and instead of making their first paid DLC, they decided to make an entirely new game which would be a sequel to the first one. This dedication to quality over profit just further reinforces how special this game is, and how the developers of indie games care about the quality of their games rather than the amount of sales that the game might get. Now, you can't talk about indie games without talking about the biggest indie game probably ever made, Minecraft. Minecraft was released in 2009, and was made by a single person. On top of being probably the best sandbox game gameplay-wise, Minecraft is a perfect example of how indie games create community. I think it's very obvious if you've ever played Minecraft by yourself, that you immediately realize it was meant to be played with friends. When you boot up a new world and you're the only one there aside from some scattered animals, you feel lonely. Personally, I find the more that I play by myself, the more the game loses appeal. But the second you get into a game with friends, you can almost instantly feel the game bringing you together. The feeling of working together and making a whole town with all your friends is a feeling that very few games come close to replicating. Minecraft came at the perfect time. It was such a novelty to get a peaceful game that didn't involve gory, mind-numbing violence. If you look at the games that came out in 2009 to 2010, it's a sea of first-person shooters and violent beat-em-ups, but Minecraft had none of that, which is why I think so many people gravitated towards it, and why to this day it still has such a large and supportive community behind it. The thing is, a lot of AAA games foster community as well, but it's a different kind of community because of the way that these games are made.
I'll break your fucking legs, you little prick!
Instead of the small 5 to 10 person teams that are common with indie development, you have huge teams of 500 plus people working on a single game at one time. This completely eliminates the possibility of connection between the game developers and the community that plays the game. When you have that many people working on a game, it's a lot easier to blame the developers for ruining the game that you play, and it's also a lot harder for those developers to receive feedback on what people are enjoying or not enjoying. This usually results in toxic communities forming around the game because the player base is constantly angry with the changes being made, and the developers are incapable of listening to their complaints because there are so many of them. These communities are usually the ones that give gaming a bad name. And I don't think that all AAA games are like this. There are definitely some great titles coming out of AAA studios. God of War has the kind of quality AAA voice acting and storytelling you'd expect from a big budget title on top of being a solid game gameplay wise. You have almost everything that From Software is putting out. You've got Doom. You've got Nintendo games like Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild which are just absolutely amazing. The problem is that these games are rare exceptions to the majority of what big studios are producing. Most AAA studios are solely in it for the money because of how much it costs to make big games, and that need for financial gain usually undermines any chance of the games feeling unique and special like most indie games do. I think the main thing to take away from all this is that even in an industry that's widely regarded as fostering a toxic and violent community, there are games that foster generosity and connection. Games can bring people together in ways that other forms of media can't come close to, and can help people form long-lasting friendships with people they may have never known.
Ooh, you wanna follow me for the dankest memes?
Shut up.
I don't post any ads!
Wait, what was the ghost's name?
Lil Peep. Lil Peep, talk to me!
Oh my god!
No, he's talking to me! I don't want you to talk to me, get the fuck...